Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle 101 webinar series. Today, we'll be discussing Untangle's NG Firewall solution and how it can help in your school environment. If you're unfamiliar with Untangle and how we can be used in schools or K-12 environments, then this webinar is perfect for you. My name is Shannon Bonfiglio. I'm part of the marketing team here at Untangle. I'll be your host today. I also have one of our sales engineers, Chad McNaughton, who will be taking us through the presentation and demonstration. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Please be sure you're selecting the correct audio preference. On the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar app, you'll find that you can either use your computer or dial in and use a phone. You will need to use the access code if you do choose to use a phone. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch or share the recording at your convenience. It goes up on the Untangle YouTube channel within 24 hours after this webinar has ended. As always, we'll be answering questions throughout the presentation, so please be sure to submit any questions through the Q&A box on the right-hand side. We have a few staff members on hand to help answer those questions. And if you do have a very specific question about your environment or network setup, please email us at sales@untangle.com or hit us up on the forums. We'll be happy to help there. All right, and with that, I'll pass it over to Chad.
All right, thanks, Shannon. As Shannon said, everyone, this is a 101 series. We won't be doing the deep dive into Untangle technical aspects, software deployments, that kind of thing. Thanks for everyone who took the time to join us today. It's end of school, you know, things are starting to change. It's summer project time, all that kind of stuff. So this is a really good time to take a look at Untangle for schools. The really cool thing about Untangle is that we're a gateway solution that provides a lot of things you may not consider necessary for a school anymore. You know, we assist in getting things like SIPA compliance and a level of compliance for other standards and things like that. But there's a very interesting opportunity in the cybersecurity industry now for schools. This is basically going to be an overview of some of the more common threats, some new information, some data concerning cybersecurity and attacks in the education market. Excuse me. I am getting over a cold, everyone. I'll try to mute myself as much as I can when I cough. But what I want to get across is that this is going to be an overview of what's happening in the educational market in the cybersecurity space, and then some solutions Untangle can provide. So as you can see in the slide here, breaches are growing in the education market, and it's getting a little bit scary. So some of the biggest changes here is that financial gain and things like espionage are some of the top motives for these data breaches. Social media breaches are growing and targeting the education industry for the first time. There are a lot of schools that are doing things like you know, social learning with their Facebook page, things like that, their YouTube channels. DDoS attacks, dedicated denial of services, and insider threats continue to cause problems, obviously, for education organizations and pretty much any other organization as well. In the graphics here, you can see that some of the top industries for social breaches are obviously public sector, healthcare, but education is now number 3. This used to be the professional, the financial sector, but education has become a target because a lot of these organizations don't have sophisticated protection like something like Untangle on the network. As you can see from the 2018 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report there in the middle, the frequency of these types of breaches is increasing, which is a concern. 292 incidents, over 100 with confirmed data disclosure, and this is in 2018, or 2017, I'm sorry. Everything else, web application attacks and miscellaneous errors, represent about 76, 2/3 of the breaches. So when we start looking at those actors who's actually initiating those threats, we see that the majority obviously are external. These are quote unquote hackers from outside your network trying to do bad things and breach your data network. But a lot of these, as you can see, about 20% of threat actors are internal, and that's a huge problem. They're already on your network. So you need visibility into that traffic and those users and things like that. And you can see still the number one motivation is money, shocking. Espionage is, you know, things like corporate espionage, you know, that's a common thing, but in the education market, that's kind of new. So even trying to get people's personal private information out of a school database is now a common thing. And then also people still try to hack schools for fun. That's never going to go away. But 72% of the data compromised from these breaches has been personal. And then you see secrets and medical adding up, so these are students, these are teachers, and those are the people whose information is at risk for those types of breaches. And that's not great, obviously. And if when schools aren't being proactive, you unfortunately have to be retroactive, and that's not really a possibility. So when something happens, you're already infected. There's no real retroaction with cybersecurity. You're either going to be looking at paying a ransom, decrypting your files, that kind of thing. So it's always better to be proactive and have something like Untangle being a gateway device and doing all this dynamic filtering. One of the biggest disadvantages in the education market is that schools can lack resources and expertise to address things like this. So as you can see on the map here, this is from EdTech Strategies. These are incidents in the education market with breaches, cybersecurity incidents. Just for a little background, the purple dots that you're seeing are actual breaches that resulted in the disclosure of personal data. The blue ones, the other common ones you see there, are basically phishing attacks. So we're looking at the difference between breaches and hacks and just simple phishing. But you see a lot of purple and blue on that map. That means personal data was compromised. So that's a problem, obviously. So a lot of the industry regulations here in the education market are pretty comprehensive. Things like SIPA and even HIPAA to an extent. But they are complicated, and they can make getting compliant more complicated because you think you need to implement 6, 7 different security solutions to get there. That's the interesting thing about Untangle, is that we're an all-in-one solution. So as you can see here, about 326 incidents reported since January 2016 from public schools and public school districts. Over a dozen of those have reported multiple incidents since 2016. You can see an incident here, local to me here, the little purple dot, or the red dot there in Colorado, excuse me, was a school district here in Boulder, Colorado that got phished for almost $900,000 over the course of months. And that's a combination of software at the gateway like Untangle to help them protect and mitigate those threats. But that was phishing, which means they need to do some user education as well. So as much as we'll talk about software and the cool dynamic cloud assessments we do with virus and malware and ransomware and things like that, a lot of this will always come down to users, and it's always going to. So students and teachers, faculty, staff members, they should always have, monthly, quarterly phishing exercises, training, things like that. Even just, quick little blog posts or articles, just letting them know that these things happen can spur them to be a little more vigilant with things like phishing. So in the case that we aren't able to completely re-educate our users and we need to provide more gateway security, we would introduce you to Untangle. So Untangle is a comprehensive UTM device. This is a unified threat management solution. For private and public schools, it's quick and easy to deploy and easy to manage, and it's going to protect your students and maintain compliance, like I just mentioned. It is a low-cost subscription-based software, so we're doing software as a service on our hardware or virtual or your hardware or in the cloud. As I said, you can leverage existing hardware or choose a turnkey appliance from Untangle. The ease of plug and play is emphasized through our cloud-based centralized management called Command Center. You could, for example, set up your first Untangle with filtering and rules that apply to everyone, and then save that configuration and apply it to other Untangles through our Command Center. So you can basically set up a fleet and then push policy across them all from Command Center. And within Command Center, and as well as on the box, you get proactive, actionable alerts, you get notifications. We can set up notification profiles for different administrators to leverage things like Slack or PagerDuty or webhooks or emails. And then we do offer advanced support. So that's remote support, whether it's from our team here or your provider that you're going through, a reseller. And then the seamless transparency is very nice because it gives you the access to jump on, see what's happening, maybe even take a quick peek at real-time session. And none of that necessarily has to come through and actually be visible. You're going to be a transparent filter for the most part. Nobody logs into Untangle by default. Nobody knows Untangle is there by default. So we're a very transparent filter there. So let's talk about some products. Untangle does offer a few different products. We are by nature a software company, but as you can see here in the products we're going to go through, we do have some very different options. So as it stands, Untangle NG Firewall is our platform. This is what we install our paid modules into. So if you were to download NG Firewall right now, You would get a 2-week free trial of our complete package. Then after 2 weeks, that would revert to our free package. So you'll still have 7 or 8 functional apps that are out, all open source and free. And then from there, you can complete that as a package, or you can buy 1 or 2 apps individually. So this is all very a la carte if you want it to be. Our apps are very dynamic, and they do what's called virtual pipelining, which means our applications inspect a packet of information simultaneously. So in a lot of other content filters, UTM devices, a packet of information will come through and it will basically go through the line of applications, and then it can exit out and go out to its destination. Untangle's apps all basically pile on at once. So they do simultaneous inspection. So when we're doing things like decrypting HTTPS, basically our SSL app decrypts it, and then web filter and virus blocker and all the other apps pile on and scan that HTTP traffic. You also get Untangle's reports, which are completely customizable and very robust. We can keep up to a year of information now in our reporting engine, and those can be offloaded with Google Drive, syslog events, things like that. Some of the quick features, you can see here, basically our little color-coded sections will look more or less like your applications look, as we'll see in my demo server here in just a minute. So falling under the protect category, we've got our firewall, phish, virus blocking, intrusion prevention. As you can see, web filtering, app control under filter, and so on and so on. This is our NGFW complete package. So if that's what you go with, you'll see all of these apps available, and that includes those add-ons on the bottom right, branding manager and live support. Live support is crucial to me. It tends to pay for itself really quick, and it adds a lot of value to that package. But when we're looking into the education market, our complete package has very, very steep discounts on the software side. So the live support really pays for itself pretty quick. That gives you access to our support team here in Colorado. Excuse me, everyone with Untangle has email support. This gives you access to our team on the phone to walk you through any problems, things like that. And you also have access to live support during our trial as well. So I mentioned vaguely a couple of real handy deployment methods. Untangle is technically what's called a hybrid cloud product now. So we are an on-premise device if you want a piece of hardware. If you want us to be completely hosted in the cloud, we can install into Amazon Web Services now. Azure is coming. We also can run in a number of hypervisors. So we do have an OVA file built for VMware ESXi. You can also run our ISO in something like Hyper-V or Citrix Zen, VirtualBox, things like that. VMware is the one we support. That's the one the OVA is built for, but our ISO will work in some other unsupported hypervisors. I mentioned again, the virtual pipelining, we don't do proxy chaining, so no app has to wait for information to get to it to scan it. They all jump on. And then we do have a lighter hardware footprint because we can be run on smaller, cheaper hardware. And whether that comes from us or you build your own, source your own based on our specs, this is Linux Debian. So it does have a pretty small hardware footprint. It does not take a supercomputer to run Linux Debian. As you can see in our hardware specs, either on untangle.com or on wiki.untangle.com, you can run a lot of traffic through what seems like a fairly undersized box because it is Linux. I mentioned vaguely our cloud-based virus assessment, threat assessment. This is called Scout IQ. This is included with both of our virus blocker apps at no additional cost. And what this is doing is it's connecting your Untangle service to Scout IQ. So your Untangle server will basically have available aggregated threat information from across the world. If there's an Untangle server in England that sees a new piece of information attached to malware or ransomware or something like that, it will upload that information into Scout IQ where that's aggregated and then basically dispersed to all the other Untangles worldwide. So as soon as that box in England sees something no one else has seen, it tells Scout IQ, which then tells everyone else. So this is a really interesting thing that we're doing here in our cloud infrastructure. And I like that we have this capability. It adds a lot of value to our virus blockers. And our virus blockers run Bitdefender and Clam, respectively. But having Untangle doing this cloud scan here is just basically another layer of protection and better information going forward. I said earlier, it's very hard to be retroactive when we talk about threats, especially when we get into ransomware and malware, things like this. There is no such thing as being retroactive with ransomware. You have to be proactive. Retroactive means you're paying, unfortunately. So things like that, the more information, the better. So as long as you're connected to Untangle's cloud, you'll get Scout IQ aggregated information and telemetry data. I also mentioned Command Center. This is our cloud-based centralized management for your fleet of NG firewalls, whether you have 1 or 50. They're available in Command Center with our complete package installed. You can even remote into them. You can push policy from one device to another across the cloud. It's becoming really, really slick. This is only about a year old. It won a silver Best New Product Award last year for Best in Biz. And we're basically putting new features in almost every week, it seems like. So this is where you can see all your boxes, manage it all in one place. You can create your own alerts here. You can see threats and auditing, see who's logged into what box. You can also manage licensing and software updates, things like that. And as I said, you can clone, edit, and push policies to different Untangle devices. It's just going to reduce management. It's going to reduce management overhead. It's going to reduce cost in general. If you do have a large school district, there might be a server that's an hour or two across town in another county. I don't know. This can really reduce cost on that stuff because you could log in remotely. The cool thing, or one of the cool things I think we can do with our admin accounts in Untangle is we can actually create admin account users. So basically, if you have multiple administrators that help with your Untangle fleet, we can set them up with access to specific Untangle servers. That employee won't have access to your account information. They can't see your subscriptions. They can't see your billing information, credit cards, things like that. They only have remote access to the servers that you assign them. So Command Center is very cool. Let's jump over to my demo server here real quick and do a quick little walkthrough on some of these apps that we've talked about. As you can see, we're going to go to demo.untangle.com. If anybody wants to jump on and kind of follow along, that's what we're going to focus on here. And the simple thing is, this is basically set up already as a small school, our demo server. That's why I'm using this server today. As you can see on my dashboard here under the policy overview, we've actually got some policies set up for what a school would basically look like. And this would, to me, entail kind of your first day setting up Untangle as an admin at a school. You would want to create policies. You would want to leverage your authentication, obviously. If you have something like Active Directory, we'll want to leverage that. So the way we would set that up would be through our apps. We would install the custom apps. This is our complete package that you're looking at here. This is everything we make. And then we would probably, step one, need to, for example, connect to your authentication. If it's Active Directory, we just do it right here, throw in the information, install our notification API on your domain controller, client side, and we'll see logins presented to us. So when our login monitor is installed on your domain controller, when a student or faculty or staff member logs into their Windows machine, it hits Active Directory, and your Windows, your domain controller, your Windows server says, oh, jsmith2 just logged in. It hits our little notification script and it says, hey, Untangle, here's jsmith2's username. And then we'll see an IP and a MAC address and all that. So that's how we connect to Active Directory or Radius or OAuth. Once that's done, we can come and set up different policies for different groups. And this is one of the essential functions of Untangle, especially in an educational environment. I was a high school design teacher for about 10 years. If I had something like Untangle in my classroom, it would have probably saved me a few gray hairs, to be honest, because I could separate, for example, adult students and high school students, and I could go as far as separating the Windows machines from the Apple machines, things like that. The way we do this is through Policy Manager. Creating a policy is very easy. All we do is say add policy. So let's say I'll do one for staff. I like to point this out here because this is where we can actually save ourselves some work. If my staff is going to have very similar permissions to, for example, say my teachers. Staff and teachers are going to have almost the same permissions. I can let staff inherit the rules from teacher. So that's going to be its parent policy. So all of those rules will trickle down to this new staff only policy. If I wanted to, for example, say teachers are going to get a little bit different rules. You can see these are actually indented below default because default is the parent policy. So everything below that's indented is inheriting from above until administrator. That's where we start over. So the way this actually looks, my default policy has all the applications installed. But if I go to teachers, which is inheriting, you can see they're grayed out because they're inheriting those rules from above. Except we needed to change their web filtering. So all we had to do was come install that app into their policy. And so now you can see that web filter is custom for just the teachers. So this is a very, very clean way of doing policy management when you have something like Active Directory. If this teacher logs in with their AD username and password, it doesn't matter if they do that, on a cell phone in the parking lot. As long as they authenticate, their username is what brings them through this policy. To do that, we have to set up a policy rule. As it stands, I have these 4 custom policies created on my demo server, but over here on the rules, you can see we don't have any rules created. So in actuality, none of these policies are valid right now because everyone is going through default still. I haven't specified anyone. So this is how I specify them. So let's do the teachers. Oh, geez. There are a lot of different ways to send traffic and users through a different policy. I'm going to go on the hypothetical situation that I've just connected to my Active Directory. So I could do a number of different things here. As you can see, we can do this by address, by IPs. We can do it by interface. If everyone on a specific VLAN, for example, needs different filtering, we could say VLAN 4 goes here. We could do individual usernames from Active Directory, and we could do time of day, day of week. Maybe during lunch on Mondays and Fridays, everyone gets YouTube available, things like that. For this particular rule, I'm looking to leverage the group in Active Directory, which is called teachers. So we could do a separate domain as well, but for this example, I'm going to say user in group. So the actual condition is group is, user in group is. So group is teachers. When you have Active Directory leveraged, all of your groups will show here in the drop-down. You don't even have to type it like I did. It'll just be there. You just go choose it. So I'm going to say teachers, and I'm going to say target policy is always teacher policy. When I hit done on this rule, there won't be a single teacher on this network that can get around this policy if they authenticate. So sure, someone could maybe pull up their mobile device and use open Wi-Fi if you have a guest Wi-Fi, things like that. When they authenticate, this rule says if you're in this AD group, you go through the teacher policy. So this is very absolute. There's no getting around this with Active Directory involved. So this is a very easy way to do this. If you don't have AD or something like Radius, we can do it a lot of different ways. For an extremely small school environment, we could even offer the Untangle local directory where you can create username and password accounts. So if you are a very small environment, you don't have authentication, you can create it here. As I said, though, the other ways to do this would be by device, by interface, things like that. So there are a lot of ways to push people through policy. And as I said, the policies can be different for every group. Once the policies are created, you would want to go in and obviously start tweaking things for different groups. My teachers, my faculty will obviously have different filtering rules than my students. So to change those around, we can go in and customize these apps like I showed you to install them, but the crux of this will be wanting to do things like filter the internet and possibly blocking mobile applications. This is getting somewhat complicated, obviously. About 80% of the internet in the US is encrypted now with HTTPS. So the long story short, if you want to, for example, block Facebook, you will be required to set up SSL Inspector with the Untangle root certificate deployed. This is one of the only 2 things we ever deploy to an end user's device. So on your local network, you can do this through Active Directory. If you want to use group policy, things like that, we can stand up captive portals to push it to other devices, mobile devices. This is certificate-based decryption. So what we're doing is trusted man-in-the-middle deep packet inspection, and this certificate is what enables that. If you've never done certificate-based decryption before, it's not all that complicated. What the certificate is doing is it's saying Untangle is trusted. So if you're going to https facebook.com, you're going to have to use the Untangle certificate to see that traffic. We're going to step in and decrypt HTTPS down to HTTP so our apps can see it. So the root certificate is what enables that. But if you are not familiar with this, the certificate itself doesn't exactly do anything. It doesn't create any actions. To me, the certificate is a key and a lock, and all you've done is put the key in. You haven't even jiggled it yet. So once we've got the cert deployed, we would create a rule to tell us to inspect and decrypt that traffic. I mentioned Facebook because it's a great example, and it's becoming really hard to block, and it's become a ubiquitous thing on the internet because there's facebook.com, but it does call outs to lots of games and quizzes and articles, and then there are also lots of mobile applications. So to catch all that traffic, we do a pretty big blanket statement here. In SSL Inspector, we say, if a certificate comes across port 443 HTTPS, and the subject has the word Facebook anywhere in it, we want to look. So Facebook is wildcarded between these two asterisks. This is called glob matching. All it is matching syntax in URLs. Excuse me. When we put an asterisk on each end, all we're looking for is what's between those asterisks. So I'm limiting Untangle to only look for traffic coming across port 443 that says Facebook. The reason I'm doing that is because, as I just mentioned, 80% of the internet uses HTTPS now. So as you can see, we have a box here that says inspect all traffic, and it's not checked. And I hope it's never checked on your server because it will slow things down a lot. What you're saying is Untangle needs to inspect every single packet from approximately 80% of the internet. And that's not very practical anymore. So we do these inclusions. These 12 or 14 rules are built in by default. So if you need to add something, we almost always just duplicate a rule like these. For example, if I needed to stop people from using Amazon and doing online shopping, I could do a very similar rule, and I would just do certificate subject is asterisk, asterisk, inspect. All that's saying is Untangle needs to look at that traffic. That will let me then go into my web filter and say, I need to block Amazon. I need to block online shopping. The way that works is under our web filter here. We'll jump into our categories list, and this is always a good place to start. This is a dynamic cloud-hosted database that contains close to 600 million websites. This is not an ACL or a static list of signatures that's installed on your server, and it doesn't require maintenance on your part. This is maintained by a vendor called Zavello out here in Denver, Colorado. They only categorize websites. This is all they do. If you're trying to block things like people using something like stealthily.com to proxy around your network, we have web proxies blocked by default. We have botnets blocked by default. So as Untangle goes through its installation wizard, it asks you to install our recommended apps or custom apps. I always say go with recommended because that's Untangle's quote unquote best practices. That is our baseline configuration. Install these apps, these filters will be turned on, etc. So this is what that looks like more or less out of the box. For an educational environment, you can see we're blocking things like I said, botnetting and things like that, but you may want to come in and block online dating and maybe criminal skills and games and gambling. So there's a lot of things you can cover in here. In an educational environment, I also always like to mention hate speech. This is a huge category and it covers a lot. These descriptions are actually very relevant and up to date. And as you can see, this is going to cover things all the way from, extremism, terrorism, things like that. The last three words are the part that are extremely important to me. This is going to cover things like cyberbullying and anti-LGBTQ sites and things like that. This is a really, really, really big category and has been kind of a lifesaver in educational environments in my experience with other customers. If you're not sure about a site's category, you can do a quick lookup right here. For example, a site can be in up to 3 unique categories. ESPN.com is one of them. Maybe you don't block sports, but someone says, I can't get to ESPN. Well, it's because you're blocking streaming video. So if you block any of these 3 categories, it should block ESPN.com, assuming we're inspecting ESPN.com's traffic. So keep that in mind, up to 3 categories per URL. You can always suggest a different URL as well. If I went, or category, I'm sorry. If I went to ESPN.com and it got blocked, I could say, well, I actually think ESPN.com is a toy site. I could do a suggestion to our provider. You see, it doesn't say submit, it says suggest. This will go to real human employees at Zavelo. They'll go to ESPN.com, they'll look at your suggestion and they'll say, well, sir or ma'am, this is ESPN. This is not a toy company. We're going to leave this as sports and video and news, and they won't change it. And I personally like that as a former admin, as a former teacher too, because no admin anywhere in my organization can change this. So I like that. That's a big part of this. You know, this is done in real time. When someone on the network goes to the web, it does a real-time lookup. Is this site still this category? Yes. Good. So it's not a thing that requires pruning or maintenance on your part. It's really hands-off. In addition, we also have a block sites and past sites tab. These are your blacklist and whitelist. They use that same syntax matching. So if you wanted to, for example, you could block the entire internet for everyone by doing asterisk, period, asterisk. There's not a URL on earth without a period in it. That does a really interesting thing. Then you could, for example, go past the one site that everyone should be able to get to all the time. So what I've done there is just untangle.com is open. I would likely go in and change that so that it's wildcarded. I just want everything with untangle.com and the domain basically to be passed. So that's the way to do that. Past clients here is similar. However, it only passes a device around the web filter. I don't personally use this a lot anymore. It's just a client IP, and what it does is it removes that device from the web filter. That's all. So Jerry here didn't want to be filtered on the internet, which is fine. But what Jerry doesn't know is that asking us to remove his device from web filter has removed him from malware protection and botnet protection and phishing protection. So I personally don't use past clients a whole lot anymore unless it's a very specific device. I use the rules tab now because it can do those exact same things and a lot more. So I could do the same exact rule, source address is, and punch in Jerry's client IP and bypass him. But I could be way more specific than that if I want to. I could say his MAC address when using this URL. So maybe I could say Jerry Smith needs access to Facebook and no one else does. So there's Jerry Smith's username, and he wants access to facebook.com. And nobody else needs it. So I'm going to say Facebook for just Jerry. And I'm going to let that pass instead of block. I'll still leave the flag checked because that's going to give me a report and show his traffic, things like that. I'm just say done and save that. And now Jerry's the only person in this entire policy who's going to have access to facebook.com. So we've talked a bit about creating policies, and that is the way to very absolutely separate groups, separate traffic, things like that. But within a policy, you can do quick little dirty rules like this for inclusions and exclusions. A great example would be if Jerry Smith was a teacher. Maybe Jerry's doing a report for his class on Facebook that week. Facebook's been in the news a bit lately. That's a kind of a hot topic. So we would want Jerry Smith to be able to get to Facebook, but no other teachers to be able to. So this is exactly how we would use this. So I would say Jerry's got this access all week. When he's done, I just come in and I delete the rule and he's back to normal. Facebook's blocked. The advanced tab here, I like to point out, does offer some HTTPS traffic inspection through host names. SNI is server name indication. This is not a very complete HTTPS filtering method because host names are not always presented anymore. So for certain devices like IoT devices, newer Android phones, devices that won't accept a root certificate, we can still catch some HTTPS traffic here. This is also where our safe search enforcing is on. This is enabled by default. We do enforce safe search on all search engines. I honestly haven't found one it doesn't work on with SSL Inspector setup. I will give you this caveat right now, though. Yes, we enforce safe searching, and we do a very good job of it. We do not, however, define what is safe. So keep that in mind. We do a really good job of enforcing safe search, but deeming what is safe is unfortunately up to Google and Microsoft and IXQuick. Blocking pages from IP-only hosts is not checked by default, but this is one of my favorite applications in an educational environment because this prevents someone from finding the IP that youtube.com calls out to and then punching that IP into their browser. What WebFilter is doing is blocking URLs. So we're blocking youtube.com with an asterisk, so hopefully anything that it calls out to with youtube.com in the URL. But a smart user could go to that blocked URL while watching their ifconfig, and they could get the IP that youtube.com resolves to. If they punch that IP into their browser, they're watching videos because you're not blocking the IP, just the URL. So this actually blocks the IP as well. And then for any Google domain, G Suite kind of environments, we can restrict Google applications. For example, if you just needed to limit them to your school's email, you could limit them to a Google domain from the school, and that won't let them sign into any personal Gmail. Basically, they will only sign into their school Gmail. We're a G Suite company here as Untangle as well. So if we were using this on our web filter, I wouldn't be able to sign into anything except for my Untangle Gmail account. And then on the unblock option here, we can offer a temporary unblock on a web page. If you get our blocked page, we can say, well, you have a custom password here that you can punch in, and it unlocks that site for default is 1 hour. You can do half an hour, et cetera, et cetera. So a teacher could have a special password that they keep. If a student goes to a site that they deem shouldn't be blocked, they can pass it themselves. So basically let them whitelist it right there on the box if they need to. So you can do that permanently or temporary. And then also the one thing I wanted to touch on here in the web filter reporting is just the abundance of reports by default. Web filter has 40 reports by default, and they're all customizable. They're all completely manageable on your dashboard if you want to add these as widgets. If I wanted to, for example, look at the sites being visited the most. These are the sites being visited the most. So if I want to add that to my dashboard, I just click Add to Dashboard right there. We can customize all these reports. Untangle can keep up to a year of information. We can offload that with Google Drive and syslog and things like that. We can just take a quick peek at what's being searched for on the internet. Someone's Googling finance and escrow fraud right now. It's good to know. But as you can see, I'm seeing a host name, and if I had AD, I would have a username. So I can see who's doing that. This is interesting in an educational environment because we can actually leverage this event table in alerts and reports and things like that to do some keyword filtering, some alerts. If for example, someone Googles a certain term, maybe we need to set up some alerts based on those terms. We can do some interesting things with it. But you could just do a quick peek here and say, what's being blocked on the internet right now and who's doing it. So this is going to show me any blocked web event. So you'll see we have a website being blocked right now. Blocked is true. Reason for action is it's in a category blocked and the category is compromised. So it's a really quick peek. This is Untangle's session viewer. So I'm just looking at blocked web events in a session viewer. So depending on our deep packet inspection, things like that, this is almost real-time traffic. So I'm looking at about a 20, 30 second delay, something like that. As I said, these can all be customized completely. If you need to customize a report, you're not seeing the one you want, don't get frustrated. We do have a lot of documentation. Our support team can help you customize any report there is and save it as a new one. We can also, though, create a new blank report. So this is something new for Untangle here, just here for this version revision recently. If we want to, if you're not seeing a report that you need, we can just start from scratch and basically create a new blank report. So Untangle's reporting is extremely valuable. Excuse me, as I said, it can keep a year of information, and then we can get into things that are even a little deeper than that. If we're looking at filtering the web, we would probably also want to look into shaping traffic on the web. You don't always have to block everything to dissuade people from using it. You could come in and, for example, use bandwidth control to throttle traffic. You can see we deprioritize things like unproductive applications. This is saying if I'm on a mobile device on your network, application control will say if you're using an app like Facebook or Snapchat, it's not productive, so we're going to throttle it. So we can do a lot of really interesting things like that with either throttling, prioritizing, tagging, or putting a quota on the user. So this is true layer 7 traffic shaping. We do this at layer 3 as well for bypass traffic. So if there's something like this that we need to maybe just throttle to death instead of block, we can do things like that and make things basically miserable for them to use rather than blocking them outright. Application control is going to focus solely on mobile applications. So I mentioned Facebook being ubiquitous, and this is a great example. Give me one sec while I scroll down to the F's here. Yes, we'll work on a search bar for this guy. It's coming. As you can see, Facebook on its own has close to 10 different applications on a mobile side. So these are actual mobile application signatures that we're looking at. So if I wanted to, for example, leave Facebook unblocked, I would want to report on that app, but then maybe I want to block or tar pit all the pieces of Facebook that people actually use. So the app will open, it's not blocked, but if you try to post anything or search for anything or watch a video, it's just going to spin and spin and spin because I'm tar pitting that traffic rather than blocking it. The difference here, blocking actually resets their connection. So the TCP connection resets, a new session starts, and some apps like a VPN proxy, some users are smart enough to see that reset and they know they got blocked on their own mobile device. So rather than doing that, we could tar pit that traffic. It will basically still block them, but it never resets their connection and no new session generates. So you're blocking them without them knowing they're being blocked. Just another kind of option, because I like to go in and take a quick peek at some of the reports in App Control to see what the actual problems are, and then maybe I need to go block or tar pit some of these. So these are mobile apps, and you can see UDP, TCP, I don't care, right? SSL, HTTP, and others. I don't need any of that. So as you can see, the number one mobile app being used by far is Imgur. It's almost half of the sessions on my network. So to me, that's drastic, and I would probably want to go block or throttle that app. So that's what I would do. I would use bandwidth control to either throttle it, or I would use app control to just outright block it. One of the important aspects of application control is the actual syntax of these applications. You can see when I was in Facebook, there were a lot of strange spellings. One of the good ones we could look at would be something like Instagram, because everyone uses Instagram, but if we actually go in and type Instagram in, we're going to want to spell it correctly, and they don't spell it like that here. It's actually spelled Instagram. So it's missing that last A. So I tend to just copy and paste these into my rules and things like that. This is a very interesting product. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mobile applications in this app that we can see. A lot of this obviously will depend on HTTPS decryption and things like that. But once we're doing that, we get that deep into a mobile device. So like I said, deploying the root certificate is important for a lot of this, but that is the level of visibility that you can have just without even enacting any rules. You could basically come in and turn on application control with the power button right here without setting up any rules, and you would start getting reporting. So without creating the rules, you could just come say, well, I just want to see what the applications are. So it would show you, there are 1,942 known applications. There's 82 that are being flagged. And then as we go through, we'd see the actual mobile apps being used. And then you can base your rules off of that initial report. So it's a very cool thing. You can install the app without really enabling it just to get some reporting. As I said, this is demo.untangle.com. There's way too much to go through here in a 101, but there's a ton of stuff available between layer 3 and layer 7. So Untangle is a very interesting solution because we work through so many different levels of the OSI model. So we can block the same things in 2 or 3 different places with different methods even. And that's doable even in a transparent bridge mode if we're behind an existing firewall. Untangle can actually be a second layer of firewall because our firewall is an app right here. So it's a very comprehensive solution, and it's a great standalone product, but it's also a really, really cool complement to existing network infrastructure because we can just slide in bridge mode without taking the network down. No one's gateway addresses change. And then we start doing this reporting for you. So you could throw us in bridge mode on a trial and get 2 weeks of reporting. And then you'd see, what the problems are, what the mobile apps being used are, all that kind of stuff. That's pretty much it for our demo section here of the slide deck. Shannon, do we have any questions hanging out there we can answer?
Yeah, there was some questions about safe search and blocking images and stuff, if you had some guidance on that.
Yeah, and as I said, that's all going to come down to SSL Inspector. The rule that we need is rule number 7. So if we're not inspecting Google traffic, we will never, ever, ever be able to enforce safe searching. So this is a little different than, and Shannon, I just caught this kind of on the fly from your question, but if you're thinking of image filtering, this is very different. So we're doing safe search. That's going to only present safe results. If you want to do image filtering, that's a very different animal, and we don't specifically do it yet. That actually analyzes pixels. So to block search results, things like that, we just need the actual service enabled. So you can see we have Google here, and number 12 is Bing. So what we're doing with both of those is inspecting. And you'll see the Google traffic, we do search subject. Tons of certs have Google on them. But for Bing, we do a host name rule. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. So that's actually going to still present us a host name, so we can do it that way. So for search engines, specifically in SSL Inspector, I like to use SNI. So this is kind of a roundabout answer, but good question. This is really one of the only applications for SNI is search engines. So you can see Bing and Ask both are doing an asterisk ask.com, but we're using hostname SNI. Excuse me. So that's kind of a long-winded answer. We don't specifically do image filtering, but we can block all those images with safe search as long as this little rule right here is enabled.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Let's see, there are some questions on how they can get started. You mentioned the pricing packages, which we were going to mention at the end of the webinar, but if you want to go into that,
sure.
Where people can buy.
Yeah, let's jump back over here. So Untangle is a very transparent company. As we said earlier, there are a lot of deployment options. You can go to untangle.com and click on the Buy tab. There's a big orange button up in the top right. All of our pricing, all of our technical specs are always posted online. I jumped a slide here, but I wanted to get to this appliances deck here, or slide here, because this is our hardware line. So whether you're looking for, like we mentioned earlier, a little turnkey appliance like you could get here, or you're going to use spare hardware, etc., our pricing is always based on active hosts. So we license by unique IP addresses. So we won't necessarily look at bandwidth or number of users, quote unquote. To us, users is basically 2 IP addresses now. So within Untangle, we offer bypass rules. We want you to only pay for what you're going to license, what you're going to filter. But I like that we are transparent. So if you go to untangle.com, all the pricing's there. There are different packages. Like I said earlier, this can come down to the type of school you are to. And Shannon, I don't know if we've answered this a lot, like public sector nonprofit stuff, but those are our software packages that are discounted for education. The nonprofit and the public sector both have 40–50% discounts on the software, and then the hardware is kind of a personal choice. Do you want hardware from us with a warranty, Untangle's pre-installed, or if you're, for example, just a hardware hobbyist and you like to build servers, you can always come look at our specs on untangle.com and build your own, or maybe you have a spare server. So it is a little different for everyone. I would recommend emailing us at sales@untangle.com to get some specifics. There are a couple of questions we would want to ask, but there are a lot of factors that weigh into our pricing, I think, outside of some other competitors, because we are offering different deployment options. We don't force a big server on you. So that's a big question, and I've gone rambling long enough on it. Honestly, contact sales or jump on the website for quick numbers. But keep in mind that the thing I like to reiterate is Untangle offers layer 3 bypass rules. So in a school of, for example, 284 devices, we would want to look into your DHCP. Maybe maybe 40 of those IPs are printers or fax machines or VoIP phones or security cameras. We would bypass those devices. If we're seeing 284 IPs, we would likely be able to bypass quite a few of those. Maybe we could bypass 30 or 40 and get you down to a smaller license count. So just keep that in mind when we look at licensing and you're going through your DHCP, printers, faxes, all that kind of stuff. We can bypass. So only filtering, or I'm sorry, only paying for what you filter is a little different, and it kind of takes a minute to wrap your head around it. But what those bypass rules do is it actually isolates those devices at layer 3 of the OSI model and keeps them from our apps in layer 7. So you actually don't see their traffic through those apps. So that's what you really pay for, basically, is our application filtering. We've gone over most of these deployment differentiators here throughout the course of the deck. I just wanted to kind of reiterate this, get it up on screen. You know, we do a 14-day free trial. I always express gratitude when people trial it first and then have questions, obviously, because you get live support during the trial. I really can't emphasize that because it's so helpful, especially if you're new to Untangle. As a lot of you may be, our support team here in Colorado wins awards for us every year. There's no reason to not leverage them if you have access to them. So if you have a box or an eval unit from us and you're trialing, that's a really, really big factor because they can help you get set up, and then we can save your configuration during the trial, and you just have that saved in the cloud. You can push it to different devices. That's what makes Untangle so seamless and so flexible, is being able to do all this on one box, save it in the cloud, wait for the second box to show up, and then push it to that one. Speaking of being easier, you can also install Untangle in the Amazon Web Services cloud now. So this is basically Firewall as a service. So this is kind of a new thing we're doing, and I love it so far. If you noticed, our demo server is actually hosted in EC2 now, which is AWS. So this is basically decentralizing your Untangle server. So if we need to, we can simplify, security for remote campuses because we're avoiding all these separate policies and things at different locations. You're creating the policy on one box, you push it to all those boxes through the cloud. This is also going to enable more of an SD-WAN type of deployment going forward. A lot of schools are getting into that to save a little money, especially if they have lots of rural campuses or sites like that. SD-WAN makes a lot of sense financially. And then Command Center centralized management is also something we've talked about a lot, and just makes it easier for you to push policies, especially if they're hosted in the cloud. It's just super simple. But Command Center doesn't see a difference, whether it's an AWS server, VMware, or it's running on a PowerEdge server. They all look the same to Command Center. I always like to brag a little bit about some of our recognition here. We did just win some EdTech awards. So we are a cool tool winner of the EdTech awards here in 2018. We won a Info Security 2018 award, won a Govy or two this year. And the ones that matter to me are the ones that are under service awards, because we still win Best in Biz awards for customer service and technical support every year since I've been here. And that's huge to me as a former admin and as a user to have good support like that. Also, if any of you are completely new to Untangle, as some may be in a 101 here, we are very active. And Untangle is not, for example, a brand new company. This is our 15th year. You can see our community forums are huge and helpful. Spiceworks gives us a lot of love now. We're their favorite software firewall and filter appliance. There's a lot of talk about Untangle now, and I think people still just say web filter or firewall. But as you've seen, we're a unified threat management device and a really, really interesting solution. A lot of educational organizations have adopted Untangle. There's some case studies on our site, just some quick quotes here from random schools, various organizations that may be about the same size as yours, something like that. We do have a lot of case studies on our YouTube and our website. And then Shannon, were there any other questions that we can answer real quick before we wrap up?
Yeah, just some questions about how to buy and get started. So as Chad mentioned, all of our pricing's online. You can quote it out, price it out. Chad, if you want to jump over there really quick and show, including the pricing for the two special packages that we offer for schools. So the right-hand side, big orange buy button, click that. You can configure your solution. You can get pricing for the nonprofit complete and the public sector complete. Those are just dependent on what you are. Are you a public school or a private institution? That's kind of the difference between those. And if you're not sure, contact us to see if you qualify for those discounts. How to get started, as Chad showed you can go to demountangle.com or download it. It's easy to download right off our website. Just go right in there, pick your format you want, and get started. It does require a dedicated server, so just be aware you will need a dedicated server, otherwise it'll rewrite your whole system.
Very good point. Yes.
Yeah. And there is information there about the public cloud and firmware if you want to run it in a different type of environment. I think we're running out of time, so if we didn't get to your question, I do apologize. Hopefully we answered most of them. As I said, we have the sales channel, sales@untangle.com, support@untangle.com, and our forums, which is our community, a live community that you can post your question and someone or one of us will answer. We're here to chat with you to kind of showcase how Untangle can help you in your school environment. We want you to be successful and protect your students and also your private data from those would-be hackers. So make sure you have the right solution in place. Thank you, Chad, for the great demo. That's really good. So as I said, just contact us. We're here to help. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.